Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I don't have anything off the top. Daphne, you want to kick us off?
Thank you. A loud blast was heard in Beirut just a few minutes ago, and a security source has said the strike was targeting a senior Hezbollah commander. Was this an Israeli strike, as far as you're aware?
No, I don't have any updates on any specific activity that we're seeing. So on this specific incident, I would have to refer you to partners in the region to speak to.
Has Israel been in touch with you prior to this about any potential upcoming strike?
So we have been in continuous discussions with Israeli and Lebanese counterparts since the incident over the weekend, and the United States is going to continue to support efforts to reach a diplomatic solution along the blue line that our hope is will end these terrible attacks and again allow Israeli and Lebanese citizens on both sides of the border to safely return home. That's going to continue to remain our focus and goal.
And have they given you any warning that they would strike Beirut if this is an Israeli
I'm just not going to get into specific diplomatic discussions, and I'll leave it to Israelis to speak to any planning or response that they may have in the works.
And we had reported that the U.S. was urging Israel not to strike Beirut. Do you feel that this could escalate tensions if this is an Israeli strike, and are you concerned about the repercussions?
So I'm going to echo a little bit what I said yesterday, which is that our support for Israel's security is ironclad and it's unwavering, especially as it defends itself against Iran-backed threats, including threats from Hezbollah. No nation could be expected to tolerate the kinds of threats that Israel is facing and continues to face. But at the same time, and you heard Admiral Kirby say this yesterday as well as myself, that we do not believe that all-out war is inevitable, and we still believe that it can be avoided. And we're continuing to work towards a diplomatic resolution that would allow Israeli and Lebanese civilians to return to their homes and live in peace and security. We certainly want to avoid any kind of escalation, and that is exactly why we continue to remain so deeply focused on diplomacy. Jenny, go ahead.
Is the U.S. prepared to back Israel if this does devolve into a full-fledged war?
I'm just not going to get into hypotheticals beyond saying that our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad and unwavering, and the threat that Israel faces from Hezbollah is very real as the events that we saw unfold this weekend. But our focus continues to be on diplomacy. We continue to believe that diplomacy is the best path forward. We think that is the best way right now to calm tensions along the blue line and to create conditions that will allow civilians to return home. That's our focus.
Is it still your assessment that both sides do not want to see this devolve into a full-fledged conflict?
I'm not going to speak for the other entities. It's certainly the United States' perspective and point of view. Like I said, and you saw the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State speak to this a little bit on their travels. We do not believe that an all-out war is inevitable, and we believe that it can be avoided, and that's exactly why we're remaining focused on diplomacy.
And I want to follow up on my question from yesterday on AMSITs who are in Lebanon. Are there any changes in potential evacuation for these folks? Any outreach to them to see if they need assistance, anything like that?
No change in posture to report, Jenny. Again, our travel advisory warning for the totality of the country continues to be at a level 3, with southern Lebanon being at a level 4. There are a number of steps that American citizens can take. They can enroll in Smart Traveler to stay in touch with our American Citizen Services team and the consular team there. They can also take a look at what commercial options may exist for their safe departure. Commercial options are still available, and they continue to be the best way for those who currently may be interested in leaving the region. But beyond that, we are constantly assessing safety and security circumstances on the ground, and we will certainly update those whenever that is prudent and appropriate, and will appropriately be in touch with American citizens when we need to.
Yeah, follow on this, Vedant. Does this department believe that the Israeli government would agree to a ceasefire deal in Gaza while engaging in kinetic activity in northern Lebanon?
I'm just not going to speculate or speculate the sequencing on as it relates to these kinds of things. First and foremost, as it relates to a ceasefire in Gaza, you heard me talk a little bit about this yesterday. We think that it can unlock a lot of things. First and foremost, create conditions for the remaining hostages hostages, including Americans, to be returned home, create conditions for the influx of additional humanitarian aid to address the situation in Gaza. It also can create the conditions for broader diplomacy to take place to get this region out of the endless cycle of violence. We also believe that a ceasefire and a hostage deal in Gaza can accelerate the possibility of progress, including lasting security and calm along the Israeli-Lebanese border. And that's why we're going to continue to remain focused on that. But I just don't want to speculate on sequencing, and I certainly don't want to speak for other countries.
Sure, it's less speculation. I mean, the secretary's readout with the Egyptian foreign minister stressed the same, that a ceasefire agreement can lead to a diplomatic resolution
Absolutely.
in Lebanon. But what I'm asking is whether you've had an indication from the Israelis that that is in the realm of possibility, or whether they believe that it is important first to retaliate fully against Hezbollah before they consider making a deal with Hamas.
Look, I'm not going to speak for other countries and actors in the region. I'm not a spokesperson for them. What I can say is that from the United States perspective, we think that diplomacy is the best path forward here. We are focused on that, engaging with officials in Israel and Lebanese officials on reaching a diplomatic solution along the blue line. Most important to us is creating the conditions so civilians can return home, and simultaneously we're continuing to pursue every effort as it relates to a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza, because not only is that beneficial for Gaza and Israel in the immediate sense, but also we believe that it has potential in the north as well.
You've already mentioned today the U.S.'s ironclad commitment to Israel's defense. Secretary Austin, speaking overseas, said pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Has Israel specifically requested through State Department channels a sort of unconditional commitment to assist should it struggle militarily in a second front?
Well, our commitment to no country is ever unconditional. Let's remember that. But first and foremost, our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. It's ironclad in the context of any threat that it faces from the Iranian regime itself or malign proxy groups like Hezbollah. We, of course, and we've spent a lot of time in this briefing room talking about it, have a robust, long-standing security relationship with the government of Israel, and we continue to support them in their efforts to defend themselves, whether that be defending themselves from the Hamas terrorist actors who undertook the horrific October 7th terrorist attacks, or other malign groups like Hezbollah, or even from the Iranian regime directly, as we saw in April.
I don't want to wordsmith or nitpick, but you said ironclad but not unconditional. Can you explain a little bit what that means?
Well, the point that I'm making is that we, of course, when it comes to any country in which we have a security relationship with, we, of course, expect that the provision of U.S. defense articles, the provision of U.S. security articles are utilized and consistent with appropriate, not just humanitarian law, but U.S. law through the various levers that exist when it comes to how American articles should be used. We spent a lot of time in the briefing room talking about that. That's what I was referring to.
So needless to say, you would understand that the Israelis understand that there would be conditions applied to whatever assistance the U.S. is providing militarily should a second front.
The point that I'm saying is that there is let's take a step back. What I'm talking about is when it comes to our security relationship, in any context with any country, there is the expectation that U.S. articles are used consistent with U.S. law. That is true in any circumstance and scenario. It's true in Israel. It was true as it relates to our security relationship with Israel prior to October 7th. It was true after, and it'll continue to be true with Israel and with any other country that we have a security relationship with.
Okay, and last one, can you provide any material update as to the status of the ceasefire talks on Gaza?
I don't have any updates to offer for, again, the reasons that I outlined yesterday. It's unhelpful to read chapter and verse about the ongoing negotiation efforts. Certainly would be unhelpful to discuss and litigate these things publicly. But what I will leave it at is what I said, that we believe that a ceasefire deal can unlock a great deal. The hostages returning home, humanitarian aid into Gaza, as well as greater diplomacy for the region to get us out of this endless cycle of violence, and that continues to be the case. Jillian, I was just going to go down a line. I'm happy to go to Said and come back.
May I ask an Iran question?
I think Said wants to stay on the region, but I promise I'll come back. How about that? Does that work?
That's good.
Good. Go ahead, Said.
Yeah, let me just, a couple of things I'm trying to understand here. You keep referring to Israel's right to defend itself, and the groups like Hezbollah and others as maligned groups, proxy groups, and so on. Don't you think you strip the people of the region of their right to fight for their occupied territories? After all, Israel occupies parts of Lebanon, occupies the Golan Heights. That is an occupied Syrian territory, occupies the West Bank, indeed occupies Gaza. You keep saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. What about the people of the region that have suffered, for what, decade now, maybe close to 60 years under occupation? Do they have a right to freedom, the right to defend a military occupation?
Let's unpack that for a second, Saeed. What we're talking about, let's just use Hamas for example,
Right.
is we're talking about a terrorist group, that has time and time again made clear that integral to their mission statement is the destruction of the state of Israel. They have said, not hyperbole, that if they are able to, they would repeat October 7th over and over and over again if they can. And so just let me be very clear about this. When we talk about the Palestinian people, when we talk about what is in the best interest of the Palestinian people, actions that we think that are reflective of the will of the Palestinian people, I do not believe, this administration does not believe, this secretary, this president does not believe that Hamas is acting in the interest of the Palestinian people. Is the question, do the Palestinian people deserve equal measures of dignity and justice? Absolutely. That is exactly why we have so fervently championed a two-state solution, one that would give equal measures of dignity and justice to the Palestinian people, one that would give the Palestinian people their own state next to an Israeli state as well. So that's what we're talking about, Saeed.
Okay.
I do not believe, and this administration does not believe, that these terrorist groups are acting in the interest of whether it be the Palestinian people or the Lebanese people in the context of Hezbollah either.
So do you believe that the Palestinians have an equal measure to live free of military occupation?
Of course we do, Saeed, and that is exactly why we have so strongly and fervently talked about the need for a two-state solution, because there is a need for equal measures of dignity and justice for Israelis and Palestinians alike. And when we have seen action, Saeed, when we have seen action that is inconsistent with that, whether that be in Gaza, whether that be in the West Bank or elsewhere, we have drawn attention to it and will continue to do so. But this administration does not believe that terrorist groups like Hamas or Hezbollah are acting in the interest of the Palestinian or the Lebanese people, respectively.
Well,
Go ahead.
okay. Let me ask you about the Israeli police detained soldiers yesterday, or the day before yesterday, suspected of raping a Palestinian, sparking protests and so on. Apparently, rape and killing and torture and all this thing, it happens regularly in Israeli detention camps. Does that constitute a war crime to you?
So the reports of abuse are deeply concerning, and we have been clear and consistent with Israel and the IDF that they need to treat all detainees humanely and with dignity in accordance with humanitarian law. We also, I spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week, Said, we reiterate the support that that the IDF is investigating some of these allegations of serious abuse of Palestinian detainees, and that is news that we welcome, and we're going to let that process, and we believe in due process, and we're going to let that process play out.
2 quick points. Now, if proven to be true, that does constitute a war crime, doesn't it?
I'm not a legal expert, Saeed. It certainly, I imagine it would be inconsistent with Israeli law. And so, of course, that is why we have been clear that the treatment of any detainee needs to be consistent with international humanitarian law.
The UN is reporting that 86% of Gazans are now, being evacuated or under evacuation orders. Is that in any way, is there a disaster looming in the next few days, few weeks, and so on, as far as the humanitarian situation is concerned?
Said, we've been pretty clear about the fact that the humanitarian circumstances in Gaza are incredibly dire, and that continues to be the case today. And that's exactly why we are pushing so strongly for a ceasefire deal to get across the finish line, because among the many things that it can unlock is an influx of humanitarian aid into Gaza. We also, you've heard us talk about this before, we are opposed to the forced displacement of Palestinian civilians, and it's crucial that sufficient aid reaches civilian populations in need, wherever they seek shelter, especially the recently displaced. We also believe, though, Saeed, that Israel has every right to defend itself and conduct certain military operations, and if part of that operation they feel the need that they need to make sure that certain areas or regions or neighborhoods are evacuated of civilians, that's certainly their prerogative to conduct that operation in that way. It is, of course, important, though, that these efforts are fully compliant with international humanitarian law, especially as it relates to protecting civilians, and certain efforts can be made, like enabling safe civilian evacuations before these operations start, providing clear evacuation information in multiple formats. So these are things we're going to continue to stress and highlight with our partners in the IDF.
Just a quick follow-up on Olivia's question regarding the talks now, the ongoing negotiations. So are there any renewed effort or maybe new ideas, or is the United States providing new incentives, whatever it is, to get these negotiations to their goal line?
I'm just not going to speak to the specifics of the process, Saeed. That would be unhelpful to it. I will leave it at, again, we are working tirelessly for a ceasefire deal to happen. We think it can unlock a great deal for the region, and we'll continue to work these efforts around the clock.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. Has there been any direct contact between Secretary Blinken or President Biden or anyone else in the administration with Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati about containing or stopping Hezbollah? And a couple of follow-ups.
So I spoke to this a little bit when answering some of the questions at the beginning, that we continue to be in close touch with officials in Israel and Lebanon, and wanting to ensure that we create the conditions so that civilians can return safely to their homes on both sides of the border.
Okay, will there be any sanctions on Lebanon for allowing attacks against Israel, or will there be any new sanctions against Iran and Syria to stop them from arming and funding Hezbollah?
So I'm not going to preview any actions from up here. You know that we don't do that. But when it comes to any kind of malign actors participating in reckless destabilizing behavior, we certainly have every right to take appropriate action. Daphne, go ahead.
The Israeli military has said it carried out the strike in Beirut in retaliation for the attack on Golan Heights. Do you have any reaction to Israel carrying
This clearly just happened, so I don't have any comment to offer. I'm happy to check with the team if we've got anything more to offer at a later point.
And are you concerned that an Israeli strike on Beirut will escalate tensions?
Look, Israel has every right to defend itself, certainly for the things that we just talked about, from malign Iran-backed proxies like Hezbollah, and it certainly faces threats like no other country does, especially in that region of the world. We, of course, want to make sure that through our diplomacy, conditions can be created in which civilians can return home, but I just don't have any other updates on this beyond that.
Sorry, do you feel that Israel has disregarded your warnings about striking Beirut?
I'm just not going to get into the specifics of our diplomatic conversations. Gita, go ahead.
Speaking of Iran, their new president is now officially in office. In his inaugural speech, he said that, first of all, he called the sanctions against the Islamic Republic as unjust, and then he said that he wants to improve on the country's economic relations with the world. Now, in view of the U.S. sanctions, do you think he's going to be able to live up to his...
Well, Gita, I appreciate you asking that question, because what the United States thinks is unjust is the Iranian regime's treatment of women and girls. What we think is unjust is the Iranian regime's treatment and its basic disregard for basic and essential and vital human rights. What we think is unjust is the way that over the past 2 years that I've just been in this job, we have seen this Iranian regime crack down time and time and time again on just basic protests, basic people making their voices heard, expressing their opinions about actions that this Iranian regime were undertaking. Those are the true injustices that the Iranian people are facing. It is the ones that are inflicted by the Iranian regime in itself on its own people. So look, you heard me talk a little bit about this yesterday. We are going to judge the Iranian regime on the actions that it takes, not any empty words. If it is interested in being a member and party to the international world order, it needs to begin by respecting and abiding by the international world order. That could be a start. But beyond that, we are just going to judge the Iranian regime by the actions that it takes.
Can you expound on the international world order that you expect Iran to live up to?
Gita, it should be no surprise to you. We've spent a lot of time in this briefing room talking about it. Iran is the biggest exporter of terrorism since 1979. It has a track record of participating in destabilizing malign activities, funding proxy groups. It has a disregard for basic fundamentals of democracy, basic fundamentals of human rights. These are all things that are what we would expect from countries who are participating and contributing members of the international world order. Michelle.
Yeah, Vedant, on Sudan, did you receive any response from the SAF, and do you expect the talks to be held in Switzerland on time?
I don't have any updates for you, Michelle. We are continuing to be in active communication with the SAF and the RSF on the invitation to attend the ceasefire negotiations in Switzerland, but we have no updates beyond that.
Thank you.
Alex, go ahead.
Vedant, given what you just said about Iran, any update for us in terms of implementation of the Massa Act? Have you guys provided with a report to the Congress?
I have no updates for you on that, Alex.
Like, moving to Ukraine,
Yeah.
yesterday you guys released another package of military aid, which is appreciated. We heard from Ukrainian leadership about that. But it also comes with the frustration that Ukrainians are still not allowed to strike back deep inside Russia, where the attacks are coming from. An update on that front, please.
So I have no operational updates to offer, Alex. I would echo what you've heard the secretary and others say time and time again, that over the course of this conflict, we have the ways in which we are able to support and enable our partners in Ukraine to defend themselves, to defend their territorial integrity and sovereignty has changed. I don't have any updates to offer beyond that. You've seen the president and the secretary talk about the ability to strike immediately over the border at targets immediately past the border that could be of direct harm, and that continues to be the case, but I don't have any updates beyond that.
And what is your understanding of where things stand on the battlefield at this point?
Look, Alex, it's a tough and dynamic fight, but Ukraine has successfully defended itself since 2022, and it has taken back more than 40% of the territory that's been seized by Russia. And we are going to continue to play the role that the United States has been, and we're going to help defend itself from this kind of Russian aggression.
Thank you. I have two more on the South Caucasus. Georgia,
Okay, go ahead.
As you know, they are moving forward with the implementation of the Foreign Agent Act. Piece of legislation was I think copycatted from Moscow. Do you have any message to the Georgian government? Today they said that they have prepared some registration form for the media organizations who receive more than 20% of their funding from the West to register as a foreign agent. So as they move forward, what is your message?
Our message, Alex, on this continues to be the same. The concerns that we had about this legislation continue to be very real, and they continue to be very serious. This is, frankly, legislation that looks like it's right out of the Kremlin's playbook, a targeting of humanitarian organizations, NGOs, human rights defenders, journalists. And so this is something we'll certainly be paying close attention to, but I don't have any updates beyond that.
Thank you. Another country has been ignoring your human rights calls. Azerbaijan. Last week, Matt tweeted about the case of Gubat Ibadoglu, and not only they're not letting him go, they also keep arresting other civil society leaders, former diplomats, minority leaders. Any concern on your end that they've been ignoring your messaging? Have you been using all the tools available in your toolkit to move the needle on that front?
We're going to continue to remain focused on the diplomacy, Alex. I don't have any updates to offer on things that the United States may be considering otherwise. Go ahead.
Thank you. On
Yeah.
Venezuela, you said you're waiting for data to be published.
Yep.
The Venezuela's National Electoral Council is still saying Maduro has won the election and secured another term in office. So if they won't publish the data you requested, would you eventually be recognizing the results and maybe even congratulate Maduro?
So I'm not going to get ahead of this process. Maduro and his representatives declared themselves the winner of what we believe is a national election that was undermined by anti-democratic actions, political repression, and electoral manipulation. The secretary was very clear about this over yesterday. The international community is watching and will respond accordingly. The best path forward is for a clear publication of the tabulation data. That is what is owed to the election observers. That's what's owed to the opposition. And we'll take this process one step at a time.
And how long would you be waiting for that?
I'm not going to put a timeline on anything. It is very clear what the path forward here should be. We have, and other countries in the region, mind you, have very clearly laid out that they are interested in seeing this tabulation data, as is the United States. That is the best way to resolve this peacefully, is seeing that information, and so we'll be continuing to monitor these conditions quite closely.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Can I go to?
I'm also Venezuela.
Okay. Let me go to Saeed. I'll come back to you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
look, Venezuela has been under severe sanctions since 2019. They can't feed their people. They cannot fix the oil facilities. They cannot export and so on. Is that a sound policy? I mean, they tried to impose, the U.S. tried to help in imposing another president and so on, Guaido and all that stuff. And how long will these sanctions go on? I mean, is generally speaking, are sanctions a good policy? I mean, one third of the world today is under American sanctions.
Right. The foreign policy decisions that this administration will take, especially as it relates to Venezuela, they are going to be assessed based on the actions that Maduro and his representatives take, as well as our relationship with any other country as well. That's how we assess the foreign policy tools that are at our disposal. Shannon.
So on sanctions, the Biden administration has actually eased some of the oil industry restrictions in the past couple months as they've tried to move Venezuela towards holding an election. Now, officials have also said that reimposing some of those restrictions on energy companies is not something that's under consideration. Is there a reason that it's not under consideration?
So I'm just not going to get into the deliberative process. What I can say is that as it relates to Venezuela and the Maduro regime, we will continue to promote accountability for Maduro and his representatives, so as long as they continue repressing Venezuelans. And whatever actions the United States may or may not take, we will assess our sanctions policy towards Venezuela, again, based on the actions that Mr. Maduro and his representatives take. And that's what it'll be rooted on. But I'm not going to get into the process beyond that.
So Maduro has also recalled diplomatic personnel from 7 countries in Latin America, including Panama, Argentina. He's also asked those countries to have their foreign ministries recall their personnel. Do you have concern? Members of the opposition have been sheltering in the Argentinian embassy for several months. Are you concerned about those officials at this point, that they could be arrested given there are warrants out for them?
Well, certainly it is a circumstance in which we are concerned about and we are paying close attention to. It is telling, though, that Maduro is breaking diplomatic relations with fellow Latin American countries who, like the United States, have simply asked for transparency, and it's something that those countries in the international community are looking for. And I think it demonstrates the Maduro regime's intolerance for dissent and a lack of commitment to the basic democratic principles that other regional governments are not just sharing and defending. And that is why, from the onset of this, since yesterday, we have said that election observers, the opposition, the international community are owed a clear tabulation data of what exactly happened here, and that is the best way to determine the path forward. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Top US officials are in Saudi Arabia for talks regarding the Houthis as an emerging threat as the Israel-Lebanon crisis is also emerging. So the question is, last week we have seen that Saudi Arabia distanced itself from any type of aerial spaceport or something like to join U.S. coalition against the Yemenis because they have already a truce with the Yemenis from December. So this time, what is U.S. stance with the Saudis? U.S. is willing to break Saudi Arabia and Yemen truce, and anything like that from the Saudi Arabia to join U.S. coalition against the Yemenis.
Well, certainly this is something the United States has played a role in previously. I don't have any senior official travel to share or read out, but maintaining calm between Saudi Arabia and Yemen continues to be a priority for us, but I don't have any other specifics for you beyond that.
Secondly, just one more.
Yeah.
Israeli Prime Minister during its address at U.S. Congress said that all the protesters who are protesting outside of the parliament, they are Iranian funded, Iranian backed. U.S. have very clear position. Every right is given at this land to the peaceful protesters. So from the U.S. Parliament, this statement, State Department will own this, endorse this, reject this, condemn it, or just distance this.
So Matt Miller spoke a little bit about this last week, and so I'm just going to refer you back to his comments when he spoke about this. Daphne, go ahead.
Just a few questions on Africa.
Sure.
We switch regions. Thanks. So The Guardian is reporting that Ukraine's military intelligence has claimed it was involved in an ambush that killed Wagner Group fighters in Mali. Is this something you're tracking, and would you have any concerns with Ukraine aligning itself with rebels in Mali?
So, look, I don't have any specific reaction to this news, but let me just say that Russia's war against Ukraine is hurting Africans. It's rising food and commodity prices, and it's having a disproportionate impact on African countries. And the U.S. has seen Russia, including through Kremlin-backed Wagner groups and other entities, exploit insecurity on the African continent as a catalyst to expand its destabilizing presence on the African continent. So this is something that we are incredibly concerned about and will pay close attention to, but I don't have any other actions to preview.
Okay, and then on Rwanda, President Kagame is required to step down in 2034 under the current constitution, but a government spokesperson today spoke with reporters and did not rule out that the government would seek to change the constitution as was done in 2015. They said that Rwandan officials are due to meet with State Department officials this week. Do you plan to discuss this in your meetings?
I have no doubt that it is one of the topics that will be discussed. I don't want to get ahead of the meeting, though. The United States is ready to continue to stand with, to support the Rwandan people in efforts to strengthen democratic institutions, protect human rights, that we believe in turn will promote long-term stability and economic prosperity as well.
And Kagame was reelected with 99.18% of the vote, according to the Electoral Commission a couple weeks ago, and election rights groups have said it was marred by crackdown on journalists, the opposition, and civil society groups. Does the State Department have concerns about how that election was conducted, and are you going to raise this?
So we did note when this happened that the elections were peaceful and that political parties were allowed to register and were able to campaign largely without any impediments, but we continue to remain concerned about the restrictive environment, especially as it relates to respect to freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. That, we believe, undermines the competitiveness and fairness of any democratic process in Rwanda. All right. Thanks, everybody.